As we're patch 9.10 tier list, we're going to talk about how good they are in solo queue as well as how good they are to improve with. I'm going to try and keep every single agent as brief as possible as to not take 20 hours. So first is Breach, and I think Breach is very simple, but he does hold players back because of his simplicity basically, where he will give you a certain amount as a new player, but then when you get to a certain point, he starts to get outperformed by other initiators in his role, as well as just not providing as much to improve with, not allowing you to take as many fights, because you tend to fall back into more of a supportive role as Breach, rather than the other initiators tend to have a bit more going on in terms of how they're supporting their teammates, as well as how much they can do as an individual. Agents like Gecko, agents like KO, for instance, are more able to do things on a more individual level, as well as have more range is what they can do on a supportive level. So I do think that those agents outperform Breach, and Breach ends up being in the C tier as a result, because I just don't think he's that strong of an agent. I think stuns as well are also not very good. So that doesn't help him. Next is Brimstone, who tends to be a bit more of an all-rounder. He's very much the all-rounder type controller, where he can kind of do a lot of everything. He has a really good post-plant, he has some lineups, although he's not reliant on lineups for his play. So he tends to be quite easy to pick up and play. And also has a decent skill ceiling to him, especially with the understanding of when to time your stim beacon and that kind of stuff. So I do think he has some merit in B tier, but I don't think he's as good as other controllers in solo queue. And we'll get to that in a minute. Next is Cypher. Cypher's in the B tier for me. This is for his most recent changes, and mainly aimed at the higher levels of play, because for Cypher, the 0.5 seconds before he reveals anyone in the higher levels of play, it will get shot unless they're really good at placing their trips in good positions. So I do think that he is weaker, and the reason why he's towards B is mainly because I think he's opened up the Sentinel. These nerfs have opened up the Sentinel role a bit, and it's in a pretty balanced state where I think majority of the Sentinels can get played, especially in solo queue. Next is Jet, and I think Jet is pretty good. She can take the first fight with her dash. She can space create with the dash. She has good smoke. She has the smoke, so she can space create with that as well. She can take fights at the smoke, and she's going to help you learn all those skills as well. So I think Jet's a really good agent to play in solo queue. Next is Killjoy. Is probably the main benefactor of the Sentinel of the Cypher nerfs, as I do think she's going to make up the majority of the play time for the Sentinels now. Maybe not so much in solo queue, because I think maybe people are going to be a bit slow on switching over to her. But I think in maps like Pearl, she will get played a lot more. Maps like Haven as well, she'll get played a lot more than Cypher does. Or at least that's what the hope is, I think. And I think that other Sentinels will get areas of play as well. But I think that she will end up being the majority of the play time for the Sentinels. Next is Omen, who still retains his spot on S tier for me. Losing the one ways kind of sucks, but I think in solo queue it doesn't matter a huge amount. It definitely was a part of his skill expression, which they've taken away, but I do think for the most part he's still intact as one of the best controllers to play, as one of the best agents to play in the game, to learn the game. I do think he's towards the bottom of S though. I think if they impact him a bit more, he's going to move down to A, but I think he's still S for now. Next is Phoenix, and I think the Phoenix buffs have been great. They definitely are helping new players. He definitely feels less clunky with his Blaze Wall. And I think that he's a lot more impactful when he has multiple flashes around, more than 2. So I do think that overall he's in a good spot to learn. I think he's a good spot in terms of power level. I think he's a great agent overall. He might get a bit tuned back, but I don't think so. I think right now, I think they like where he is, because he is also a mobile, non-dash, he doesn't really have any ways to speed boost either. So he really is not like a space creation type duelist as much. He's more all-rounder and has a lot of agency as a result. So I don't think he will actually receive nerfs, because I do think that the space creation type duelists are still going to be the ones played mainly in pro play. Although I do think Phoenix will see fringe pro play still. But I think in solo queue he is really strong. The next is Raze, so I think is A tier towards B tier, I think. And that's mainly because it's more of a comparison, right? I think Raze has definitely fell off a bit since her nerfs. And I do think overall, she is still fine. She's just not as good as Jet or Phoenix, and also not as good as some other agents that I'm going to talk about in the future in the role. So she's towards the bottom of A, towards B tier. Next is Reyna, who I think is C tier. The reason why she's C tier and not D tier, because usually I think she's one of the worst agents in the game, it's actually because there's 2 reasons. Comparatively, there is another agent that is strictly worse than her. And secondly, she does have some level of you can play her, where if you are, for instance, a smurf or like better mechanic, you know that you're better mechanically than the average player in your elo, it might make sense to play her. Because she does have a level of that. She can snowball in the singular rounds like no other agent. But I think overall, if you're trying to improve as a player, you never pick her. Because I think that she doesn't really teach you that many skills. She's all about being a show-off mechanically. I can basically use no util to kill you, essentially is what she's saying. Lear is obviously quite a good ability though, and can be good in combination with other flashes. So she's not terrible, but well, she is terrible, but she's not like the worst. Next is Sage, who is very similar in terms of Reyna's heal and dismiss, where there's a lot of like there's a lot of conditions to meet for her abilities to be good. The thing that saves her from being D tier though is that the wall and the slow give her a lot more agency that isn't conditional, and you can do a lot of things with those two abilities. Mainly the wall. The wall is quite not universal. Is it very adaptable? Very you can use it in a lot of situations. Is what I'm trying to say. And I think it's really good as a result. You can do it. You can use it for multiple different things. And I think that it gives you a lot of agency as a Sage player. The problem is that holding it back is the heal is too situational. The res is even more situational. The bright side with the res is that it does have a really high when you get like a good res on someone, maybe like a good ult up and that kind of stuff can be great. But it's very conditional. Next is Skye, who is also in the C tier, but I think that she's very close to the B tier. I think that overall people are like underrating Skye, but it's mainly because of how good the rest of the agents are in the Initiator role. So I do think that overall she's still fine. She definitely suffers from having one dead ability in the heal, because the heal is just fairly worthless. Once again, same problem with Sage, right? It's conditional. It's not going to do anything. Even if you get a full heal, sometimes it won't do anything, right? The person will still get one tapped, you know? So it's very conditional in its impact. And I think that the third bird not being available is really hurting her. So I do think they may need to bring it back and up the cooldown. So then you only get the third bird exclusively in post, rather than sometimes you'll get it like just before post. So I do think that that might be a change that they want to implement to Skye, that they should implement to Skye. But we'll see. I think that Skye is not in the great position right now. Next is Sova, and Sova for me is like a toss-up between A or B, because he is a decently strong agent, and right now I think he definitely hinges on where he goes here. It hinges on how much Cypher will still get played, because right now his shocks are really strong versus Cypher, and if Cypher still continues to get played, he will continue to get played. He's more of like a response to Cypher than anything else right now in solo queue, because in solo queue, as an agent himself, agency-wise, he doesn't have the greatest amount of agency in his role. For instance, I think Fade has more agency as individually as Sova, but Sova's so good against Cypher right now, who gets played a lot. So I do think as well that sometimes Sova can outperform Fade in an individual level, mainly to do with the ultimates, where I think Sova can take someone out of the round instantly with his like drone plus ult, while Fade can't do that in any meaningful way, and she does rely a bit more on the team sometimes. But I think on average, without ults considered, Fade has a bit more utility to help herself with the prolers mainly. Okay, so next we'll talk about Viper. And I think Viper, unfortunately, is B tier right now, but I do think it's the map dependent. Like right now, there's not really any Viper maps. If there were Viper maps, I would probably put her a bit higher. Probably not S, because I think that she's one of the agents that I think has like feigned complication, or like feigned complication is the most complicated way I could say that. It's more like just it looks like it's complicated when you first see it, but then when you actually play it and you've played a couple games on it, it's not actually that complicated to understand her. That's what I mean. And I think that as a result, she's probably not the best controller to learn the game on, because even though she does give you this, like, first of all, her improvement as well is quite individual, where she's going to teach you things that are only Viper skills rather than general game skills, as well as Viper not really being strong in any maps right now, kind of puts her in B tier for me. Next is Yoru, who's very close to S tier for me. I think that the only thing holding back is his skill level, his skill floor, where you need to be a certain skill level to really play this character very well. But otherwise, he has a really strong utility. Overall, he's a very strong agent, and I think if you know how to play him, you can take over game after game. So I do think that Yoru is really strong. Next is Astra, and Astra kind of suffers from being good in pro play, so therefore it tends to be not as good in solo queue. Because in solo queue, you don't really play the way that Astra favors. Astra really likes set plays, likes to play around the stars, pressure with the stars, that kind of stuff. And it tends to be hard to achieve those things in solo queue as opposed to pro play. So she's B tier for me here, especially as well with her not being really good in anything below Immortal, in my opinion. And I think in the lower levels of play, she would be towards C tier. So I do think that this is like the middle ground, basically. Okay, so KO for me is in A tier because he tends to be quite versatile overall with his flashes. His silence is really good. And I think overall he gives you a lot of agency as an individual player to do flashes for yourself. You can also do flashes for your teammates. So you're not like only flashing for yourself like a Phoenix. You are able to like pivot back into a more supportive style if you need to. I think overall that makes for a very much more strong agent. I do think his flashes are probably the most versatile in the way that you can throw them. Like where you can detonate them, the timing of them, and that kind of stuff. So I do think that he is a really strong agent, and the silence mechanic cannot be like underestimated. I do think it's quite a strong mechanic for defending against these sentinels, or like attacking against these sentinels, and also defending as well. It's good for defense as well because if you know how to time it, you can stop the defense and delay the defense for another 8 seconds. So it's really strong in that situation. Next is Chamber. And Chamber is in S tier for me, or towards, well, actually, no, I think he's A tier. He's very close to S tier, though, because he can take the first fight like Jet. He definitely struggles a bit more on attack, but I think having the free operator, having free headhunter bullet, not free headhunter bullets, but having like headhunter bullets that are only 100, basically having like a very, very cheap gun, you tend to be on top of your economy a lot of the time, and that is a really strong thing to have in solo queue, to not really worry about your economy a huge amount. You can basically just always have a buy. You can always like you can pretty much always have a chance of like midway through the half. If your teammates are an eco, you might be able to hero rifle. You might be able to use your operator to bridge an eco round. He is really, really strong in solo queue, and I think he's underrated in pro play as well, slightly. So I do think in pro play he would actually be fairly equal to these two. But I think that overall he doesn't provide as much utility, so that's the reason why he's probably not S. He's not really like super util heavy. He's very much reliant on you taking the first fight, but he isn't super risky in the way that Reyna is, and the way that Jet is less risky as well, right? But Jet has other things going for her like space creation, which Chamber doesn't have. So I think overall Chamber is really strong as an agent in solo queue. Okay, so next I'll talk about Neon, and I think Neon is one of those agents I don't really need to talk about very much. She's very, very, very strong currently. I think in terms of improvement though, she's probably not the best agent to use to improve. She can definitely help you understand timings and like how to cheat them, and also some fighting stuff. But for right now, she probably is going to get nerfed, so I wouldn't recommend you play her right now. If you are looking to improve, because she's going to get changed, and you're going to be learning things that are going to be changing probably. And it might even be a shock to you when they do change, because you might be getting away with things that you wouldn't otherwise get away with, and you might be learning things that won't work in like very, very near future. So I wouldn't recommend it for players trying to learn the game, but if you are trying to get fast elo, Neon is probably the pick, right? Next is Fade, and Fade for me is towards like the A tier, B tier. Like she's very close. The reason why I think Fade is A tier over Sova is because I think on average, if you don't take into account the ults, because Sova's ult is definitely better as an individual, I think Fade as an individual agent, giving yourself the chance to fight and having individual agency, I think Fade is marginally better than Sova in that situation, mainly because of the way Sova has to be so selfless with the rest of his kit. He has to be selfless with the dart, has to be selfless with his shocks now because of the Cypher meta, and he has to be selfless with his drone. Not always, but majority of the time you're going to be selfless with the drone. So I think in lower to like mid elos, you can definitely afford to be a bit more selfish, but I think in higher elos, you kind of relegate to be a bit more selfless. And I think Fade definitely has more resources to be selfish with the additional prowler, I think, mainly. Like 2 prowlers. One of those prowlers you can definitely use on a more selfish basis. I think the Haunt is definitely worse than the Dart, though. But yeah, I think Fade overall, I think it's really close, to be honest. Maybe I should do put her in B, because I think it's really close. I think it's marginal. So yeah, we'll put it in B. Next is Harbour, and poor Harbour. Honestly, Harbour is personally one of my more fun characters to play. I love playing Harbour, but he's just so unbelievably weak. Because he basically is, his basic kit is 3 smokes, and then his ult is actually quite good. But it's also a stun, so it's not always super consistent. It does help in terms of like finding where they are on the site and that kind of stuff. But for the most part, he's a pretty weak agent. He really needs to see changes. So I wouldn't recommend anyone play him, mainly because of his power level. He does have some stuff to learn, but the thing is that when something is so weak, in the same way that when something is so strong, there's not really much point in playing it, because for Neon's case, it's going to be different, and you're going to be learning things that don't actually work in the future, in the very near future, so there's not much point. You're kind of wasting your time. And in the same way for Harbour, he's so weak that you're going to be learning things that you're going to be like, having to learn things on such a crazy level to actually have impact on him, where you won't get rewarded for actually making the correct plays, because you won't get rewarded because you're playing something so weak. So that's the reason why I think Harbour is like D tier, because he is weak, and on top of that, he's not really going to help you improve as a player, despite him kind of having some things that can help you. He does need to have a high enough power level for it to actually be meaningful what you learn. Next is Gecko. Gecko's A tier. He's very good at like understanding taking increments of space with his util, where you can take one set of space, pick up your stuff, take another set of space, pick up your stuff, that kind of stuff, right? He's really good at that. And he's also probably the strongest initiator right now, because he's just got such low cooldowns on everything. His thrash is really strong. Mosh is really good. It's really big moshes as well. I mean, Dizzy as well, I think recently got buffed with it, like clouding the minimap now, I'm pretty sure, when you get hit by it. So I think overall, he's a very strong agent. The Wingman as well. Wingman giving you the ability to plant with having all your guns out is also really strong. You were able to defuse with all your guns out as well. So Wingman is actually really, really strong. Deadlock is B tier for me. The reason why Deadlock is B, and honestly, she could go up. And I could actually see that happening. The reason why she's B tier is she kind of just level off with the rest of the Sentinels. But the thing is, with Deadlock, is that in, I think, Soloq you can get away with placing the traps and people not really realizing how to play against you. Especially because as well, you aren't really that play. Deadlock isn't played very much. So it can be really good to have, if you have interesting setups and know how to mix up your setups on site, you will pretty much always get away with a kill when they attack your site. So I think Deadlock is really strong that way. But ult recently got buffed as well. Well, it will kill guaranteed, even if it gets like snagged on something. So there are new lineups you can do with the ult that you couldn't do before. So it's pretty good. ISO is A tier. I think ISO is actually pretty self-explanatory. The free shield, being able to take a fight, will help new players but will help new players have the confidence to take fights because they're going to have a shield. And I think that overall ISO is a decently strong agent in terms of macro play as well. Those line line fragiles are good. The ult is really good if you know that they're going to be a single person on the site. So it helps you ISO makes you think about the macro play a lot more than the other duelists do. So in terms of improvement, he can be really strong that way. And I think overall, in terms of power level, he is also on the strong side. Next is Clove, and Clove is probably, I think, in terms of like statistically, Clove I think is the best Soloq agent. It might be Neon currently though. I don't know 100%. I haven't looked to them in a while. But I'm pretty sure Clove and Neon are like the best, strongest 2 agents in Soloq. And the reason for Clove is because they simply just have smokes and the ability to fight. So I do think Clove is probably one of the best characters to learn as well, because they are a smoker and they also have duelist elements. You can actually play this agent and learn a lot of the game, because you can be selfish with the smokes, you can be selfless with the smokes. You have ways to take fights like Decay. You have ways to snowball through the rounds with the pick-me-up after you've taken a fight with smokes or with the Decay. So overall, Clove is a really strong agent. And lastly is Voice. Voice to me is a B tier. Kind of leveling off with the rest of the Sentinels. I do think we will see Voice get played a decent amount. I think in Soloq though, they're underrated. She's underrated. I think she really struggles with the setups, because I do think that you can definitely have lackluster Voice setups where everything just gets shot or baited. And I think people might be feeling that when they play, and therefore drop Voice. So I do think that does have a bit of a skill flaw to it with how you set up. I do think that Vice is pretty good, but not the greatest in terms of power level right now, but we'll see a play share in Sentinels. So that's my tier list. I would love to know what you guys think in the comments below. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you in my next one.